And Isaiah says, here am I. Send me. He's never been more ready than he is right then. Because he has the majesty of God in full view, he's got his humility, his mission will be awesome. It'll also be very difficult, because God said, you're going to go tell them that I'm going to judge them, and they're not going to hear me for a while. The judgment is coming. That's a tough mission. In Luke 5, Peter is fishing, and he doesn't catch fish all night long. And Jesus says, let's go fishing again. And Peter says, Lord, we tried all night long and couldn't catch anything. Jesus knew that. And he says, do it anyway. And Peter says something that every Christian should say. Because you said it, Lord, I'll do it. And he did it. And Jesus gets in the boat with him, and his boat fills to overflowing. The fish obeyed Jesus. Something miraculous and majestic happened. They filled his boat, and Peter does something very strange in Luke 5. He looks at Jesus in the eye, and he says, depart from me, I am a sinful man. Get out of my boat. And that seems strange to say to Jesus. But you know what just happened? Majesty met humility. Glory met humanity. And Peter saw something that scared him, and when sinners get close to the sovereign, something's got to give. And right after that, Jesus said, Peter, you just had your best day of fishing, but from now on, you're going to be fishing for men. I've got a mission for you. Lord, I just set my record. Haven't even picked up my trophy. This open understands about trophy fish up in Alaska. Majesty, humility, and mission. John is an elderly man on the island of Patmos in Revelation 1. You think his life was over. You couldn't shut him up. I don't know how old he was. The longest living apostle, certainly. No debate about that. But he's an elderly man, and he's arrested and bound to an island for preaching the gospel. Couldn't shut him up. Nobody retires from Christianity. Nobody's supposed to. So he's preaching the gospel, and there he is on that island. He's surely thinking that who knows what's going to happen to my life from here, but God meets him on that island. And maybe the greatest revelation in the Bible happens to John, where Jesus takes off the skin, which is what the word revelation means, the apocalypse, to take the cover off. He takes, on the earth he walked with flesh and blood, but in Revelation he takes the skin off, and John saw him more majestic than anybody has. His hair was white like wool, and spoke with, the words were like rushing river, and his face was burning bright. This is an incredible scene. And John is so overwhelmed by it, he falls at his feet as a dead man. John, what are you doing? You got to pull it together. You know Jesus. You walked with him for 3 years. You were there with his mother. No, you know what? He saw some. You know, some of us think we've seen all there is of Jesus. We have not. And Jesus puts his hand on him and lifts him up, says, John, don't be afraid. I'm the first and the last. I was dead, and I am alive forevermore. You see the majesty of Christ. You see the humility of John. He just collapsed like a puppet. Elderly man, think he's probably done. What is his mission? Write. Isaiah, go. Peter, fish. John, write. What did he write? He wrote the book of Revelation. It's not a bad book, folks. Not a bad book. Drives me crazy when people say, I don't read the book of Revelation. It's too confusing. Well, I've never let that get in my way. It's very confusing. But keep reading and keep digging in that book. What a great mission. Now let's go to Moses. Let me tell you why I like Moses the most. Isaiah, Peter, and John saw more than they ever hoped for, but as you'll see today, Moses got less than he hoped for. Moses wanted more of God. Listen, I think about this. My kids and your kids are born into a hard world, are they not? Harder than the world Moses was born into? Born into a death sentence. If it's a boy, he's dead. The world's always been evil. It's always been hard. My kids have it tougher than me, but it's always been tough. At best, he's going to be a slave. We can't bring our kids into this kind of a world. You can if there's a God and He's sovereign. At best, he's a slave. At worst, he's dead. That's what he was born into. But before he even knew how to spit, he was in Pharaoh's house. From slavery to nobility to obscurity to humility and majesty and mission. It's a great story. Let's jump into it. Chapter 2, beginning in verse 11. I want you to see the mission of Moses. 40 years he was in Pharaoh's house. We know that he knew he was a Hebrew. We don't know a whole lot of detail about it. Cecil D. DeMille fills us in on some of that stuff. Beginning in verse 11. Now it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens. He knew. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way and that away. Why does somebody look this way and that away? I'll tell you why. They know what they're about to do is wrong. This is Moses' mission. This is not God's mission. Too many of us think that if we're on mission for God, it's the right mission. Find out God's mission for you. And when he saw no one, find out somebody saw him, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting. And he said to the one who did the wrong, why are you striking your companion? And then he said, who made you a prince and judge over us? This is when Moses wanted to be a deliverer on his terms. Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? So Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Stop right there. Born under a death sentence, born into slavery. Let's not forget that there are women that God is using in a mighty way, even as we get to this point. There are midwives who aren't afraid of Pharaoh. There is a mother not afraid of having birth to a son. Hebrews 11 said she had great faith. She and her husband. She actually followed, ironically, she followed the Pharaoh's edict to some degree. All boys go into the Nile. And that's where her boy went. With a basket and some pitch and some tar. The midwives are used by God. Mom is used by God, her great faith. Faith against 400 years of slavery. Faith, what odds? That is a story we all need to get a grip on today because we're worried about the economy, worried about this and that. The stories of the Bible far exceed anything we are facing right now. Far exceed it. And the bigger your God is, the smaller your economy problems are going to be. So the midwives step in, godly women, a godly mom, a godly sister Miriam, and then somehow Pharaoh's daughter, there she is. All these women used by God. The unseen hand moving and shaping and shaking all that happens. Moses runs, he flees, he has his mission. Doesn't go so well. And now let's get the Majesty. Chapter 3, jump to chapter 3, 1 through 6. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. Yes, he got married. He was a hero. He was a deliverer again. He delivered these ladies, and it just was in his blood. He was a deliverer. He was what God wanted him to be, but he wasn't under God yet. So it says that he had a father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. By the way, that's the same as Mount Sinai. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. You all know the story, but I want you to see the majesty of what God did to prepare Moses for mission. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. He is not thinking theologically. He is not thinking about God. He is just curious. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And I would have loved to hear the sound of Moses' voice on this one. Here I am. And then he said, do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. When you pray in your garage is just as holy as this church you worship in on Sunday morning, because of the God you meet there. And that's a majestic view of God. That's a majestic view of His relationship with you. It's a majestic view of how He's revealed Himself to us. Moreover, He said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. Smart man.